Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Build to Rent, the future of UK housing with Sian from Inventory Base. If you have any questions, pop them into the question box and we'll try and get them answered, as many as we can. Alternatively, you can email courses.events@propertymark.co.uk and we'll get back to you after the webinar. And over to Sian. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Kelsey, and thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. Build to Rent, the future of UK housing. The reason I picked this particular subject, it's very on topic at the moment with what's going on in the industry in regards to available housing and also the infrastructure of our sector. Interestingly enough, I'm actually at the Olympia today at the London Build exhibition where we've been exhibiting for the last 2 days, and it's amazing how much infrastructure there is in regards to just general building and also around the commercial side of the build to rent sector. So it actually is quite poignant that I'm actually here today. So I'm hoping that my internet remains stable, and if for any reason you can't hear me or there's any interruptions, please accept my apologies straight away, and also do feel free to use the chat function, which Kelsey's going to look after for me. So if we start the webinar. We go to the next slide, please, Kelsey. I'm just waiting for that slide to come through. There we go, thank you. So let's get some context. In 2019, the UK government set a very ambitious target of constructing 300,000 new homes, and that was annually. Oh, sorry, we've seemed to have jumped. We need to go back one, please. Thank you. And this is to address the pressing housing shortage that we've had. But as we all know within the sector, you're an agent, letting agent, estate agent, and anybody involved in this area, you know that we're falling really short. We're delivering only 220,000, and that's giving us a gap of 2.3 million homes, and that's getting bigger each and every time. So this is where build to rent is fast emerging as a promising solution, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the solution, but because it's already grappling with some of its own challenges. But I'm seeing an equal measure of determination and also innovation to not only tackle the shortage, but provide quality homes and better lifestyles for renters. So the questions I'm going to be looking at to try and address today is, what's the future of UK housing? How will it reshape the property market landscape? And ask the poignant question of whether build to rent actually is generally the way forward for us as an industry and also from the consumer point of view. So we go to the next slide. So in today's Power Hour, we're going to be looking at whether the sector is fit for purpose and looking at the state of the private rental sector. Looking at the build to rent costs and yields, so basically, you know, is it going to be viable from an analysis point of view? Is it from a financial point of view? What are the pros and cons and the advantages and challenges of the build to rent sector? Also looking at legal insight, so there are some hidden complexities in the sector over and above what you would normally expect, especially with the Building Safety Act and other legislation measures that are in at the moment and due to come in as well, especially if we get a change in government. I also want to look at the retiree dynamic. So there is a growing influence of retirees in real estate that are looking to rent. So, you know, how is that going to impact the build to rent market? And does that give you more or less confidence in how we can then move forward? Looking at how we can safeguard the build to rent portfolio, so agent essential information to try and make sure that when you're looking that it's a potential new service offering, a new stream, somewhere else you're going to look to bolster your pipeline, you know, what else do you need to be aware of over and above the normal legislation that you need to be implementing from a rental perspective? Also looking at the pitfalls and finding effective risk management and mitigation strategies for actually managing that portfolio, because they will always come with risk guaranteed. And then looking at how PropTech is actually turbocharging the build to rent property management and sector, and whether the revolution is exactly that or is actually becoming a barrier to how the sector actually manages this particular issue. So if I can have the next slide. So looking at it from a PRS fit for purpose point of view, the UK rental market is facing an unprecedented crisis. There's been a 1/3 decline in supply, and we can already see that the rents have already gone up, and is by going up by an average of 11%. Some areas that's a little bit more, some a bit less, but on average it's around about that. But demand is up by 50%, and that's growing. So there's economic challenges and demographic shifts that we all have to navigate as agents, as the people within the sector. And contributing factors include housing shortages, soaring property prices, and also economic instability. And we've seen that certainly since COVID started, and also through now where we are in regards to all the issues that are happening around the world that are impacting on the market, interest rates, and also inflation. So this is all pointing to an unstable economy. And coupled with a high property prices and robust demand, these are deterring new landlords and prompting existing ones to sell. Now, there's a lot of conversation that there's a mass exodus, but certainly there's a lot of people saying actually there's not a bigger exodus as we thought or imagined. However, we are finding that there's 35,000 more properties being sold than bought into the private rental sector. So of course this is worsening the scarcity of choice. So this is meaning that there's less choice for the renter, and with landlords selling and people buying that to take that back into the home owners sector, it means we can't have the movement around the sector as we would like and as is needed, as more and more people come in, because you've got less choice, and therefore people tend not to move, and then that creates what I would say is a stalemate on the ladder of the journey of the property renter. So it's fair to say that the rental market is grappling with several challenges, and a lot of also this is called about age and safety of stock, because there's a lot of properties that are just not fit for purpose, and this is one of the reasons why the government is looking at re-evaluating HHSRS and decent home standards, because there's so many properties in the sector that really should not be occupied and need a lot of work to be bringing up to a standard that is safe and healthy for the renter. There's also regulatory changes. We know the Rental Reform Bill is being looked at, it's going through Parliament, going through Lords. We've got Section 21 that is going to be revoked, but then we've got issues around, well, how do we then manage when there's tenants that need to be removed from the property through maybe antisocial behaviour or a failure to rent, and all of this needs to be taken into consideration. And then we've got economic pressures, cost of living, the fact that fuel bills have gone up, we're going into winter, we're already seeing mould issues in property. So all of these are pressures that are coming to be borne on the rental market because of the affordability or lack of within tenants and what they've got in regards to income and also wages. And of course then there's also demographic shifts which are also shaping its landscape. So let's move to the next slide. I want to give you a figure to look at. So here you see there's a figure, 8.6 million. But what does that mean? So if we go to the next slide, this is the figure that is the culmination of all the renting that is happening within the sector at the moment. So we've got 2.4 million housing association tenants, 4.6 million private renters, and 1.5 million local authority renters, so making up that 8.6 million. So there's a lot in the industry that are looking for rent, are already in renting or looking potentially to move. So with that kind of number, there comes a huge amount of issues, complexities and things that has got to be thought about, not just from the renters themselves, but landlords, the agents and the infrastructure that we have. So if we can move into the next slide, please. So this asks the question, or begs the question, is the PRS fit for purpose? So you see here in the private rental sector, it represents 19% of households, and that's grown from 2.8 million to 4.5 million, and that's since 2007. We're already exceeding that in 2023, and estimates are that we're going to go up to 6.4 million, even as quick as up to 2025. But the problem we've got is that the housing stock isn't being built as quick as the numbers are going up. Build to rent itself, properties only actually make up 1% of the UK total housing stock. But with tenant preferences indicating a growing interest in energy efficient rentals and smart home features, you can see where the demand is. But at the moment, they're only 1%. So we have already got such a big gap within the industry as to how we're going to manage all of that want, need, and then be able to build that and create that portfolio infrastructure so that people can actually move into them and start, building their family, settling their family, and living in safe and energy efficient accommodation. And also, this is also impacting on rental prices. So even though they vary regionally, we have seen a decline in London and growth in other areas. And we know COVID-19, and I think in some respects, we get a little bit bored of hearing COVID, and in a way I can't do, but unfortunately, that period is going to be, it is in our history, and we've got to look at it, because before COVID things were different, and now afterwards they're different as well. And the pandemic definitely influenced rental choices. We saw people wanting to move to bigger properties, get more space, become more rural, so that a lot of them migrated out of London because they weren't able to work from home and have a space in home so that they could relax and enjoy family life. So we saw a lot of changes, and preferences, certainly from remote working, really affected that. So it affected what the housing stock was available and how we used it. So we can go to the next slide, please. So, but when we look at yields in regards to the rental sector, we can see there's a huge amount of disparity in regards to what we're seeing across the UK. And I've taken just a snippet here of information in regards to yields. And you can see 9.89% in Edinburgh, 5.71 in York, down to Portsmouth at 5.36, and then Liverpool 4.29, Nottingham 5.91, and as you expect, higher in London at 6.57. So these are the kind of average yields that we would be expecting to see within the industry as it stands at the moment. And obviously that influences how landlords manage their portfolios, where they look to maybe get newer property. Certainly the north and certainly up in Edinburgh and Scotland are seeing a bigger growth in the market for landlords to buy property because the yields are so much better. But we're seeing less of it down in the south, in the Portsmouth area, and further down towards Cornwall, where we're seeing those yields come down. But the average is certainly something that all landlords look at, but also agents look at as well. So we can go to the next slide. So let's look at the build to rent costs and yields. So the current stock at the moment stands at 92,140 homes or properties or stock, with 59,000 or just over homes under construction. And in addition, there are 112,511 homes in the planning pipeline, including those in the pre-application stage. This is all sourced from Savills, and it actually is very up to date. It was actually sourced this month. So you can see the sector size is 263,694 homes, whereas in contrast with the build to rent sector in Germany, where they've got 40%. So if you can imagine, we've only got 1%, and they're the kind of figures we've got, how much the build to rent will impact in the industry in regards to the amount of homes available and what that will mean for renters looking for homes and helping people to be able to move and also access the sector. So cost analysis in regards to build to rent, according to the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, the average cost build for build to rent and the developments ranges from anything from £1,200 to £1,500 per square metre. But the operational costs could be seen as a little bit higher at 25 to 30% of the gross rental income. But this is why you want to make sure that any processes, your facilities management, your property management, and how the property and the build and portfolio is managed is optimized, so that you can actually reduce that by making sure everything is automated, and you're using digitization to really control both the property, the experience, and also the costs. And by doing that, the yields currently at the moment are anything between 4 and 6%. We know that there's regional variances, and as we saw in the previous slide, we've already seen that in the private rental sector. but certainly from the build to rent sector, 46% is about where it's at the moment. And you think about it, if we're only at 1% of that, imagine what we'd be like if we were 40% like Germany is. Obviously, I appreciate Germany, European markets, they're more used to renting. We've always come from a place of that, you know, in order to be in property in the UK, you need to be a homeowner. That's what's always been drummed into you. Even myself, you know, I've been a homeowner, I'm currently a renter. But yeah, my overriding priority is always to be a owner. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to live that way. And certainly when you look to European markets, they enjoy a much better market. There's a better yield for landlords and some respects a better quality of property and experience. Not always, but in the main, it seemed that way. So if I can go to the next slide. So as you can see here, just in graphic form, the average rental yield for the PRS is 4.75%, whereas in the build to rent market, you're looking between 4 and 6 at that 1% stage. So what that is telling me, and I think you would agree, is that there is plenty of growth there and plenty of opportunity, certainly from the landlord's point of view, and certainly from the agents. If I can have the next slide, please. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all hunky-dory and roses. There's always going to be advantages and challenges with any sector, with the PRS, with social housing, with build to rent, and also being in home ownership. So I thought I'd flesh out a few here, and also to give it a bit of balance as well in regards to where we see the sector at the moment. So looking at a first advantage, build to rent developments, they prioritise tenant needs. They foster community and their community spirit and living as a community, which some people would argue right at this moment in time is very much lacking in the industry, because we've gone from very much knowing your neighbours, knowing where you live, you know, being really entrenched in the local community, to one that's very transient, and also that it's very difficult to get embedded if you're moving around quite a lot. Prioritising tenant needs by giving them developments where they've got all that community spirit and ability certainly makes that whole experience much better. And that reduces turnover. And it also ensures, from an investor's point of view, a reliable income, because you're not seeing the voids, you're not seeing the turnover, because people are happier where they are, they're more content, they've got all the infrastructure they need to be able to live in that area, and especially if they're then looking to maybe grow their family or certainly put down roots with their family. But obviously one of the challenges with that is acquiring or developing properties for the build to rent market, because one, it requires significant upfront capital. There's limiting entry for investors, especially if you're on a smaller scale. Biggest investors, your corporate investors, do have the larger pockets, the deeper pockets. But it doesn't always necessarily mean that they're the right fit, because sometimes they can become faceless, they become less about community, whereas the small investors tend to invest more in that spirit, more in the tenant experience. Not always the case, but certainly that is some of the indications and feedback that has been seen from the build to rent sector. So even acquiring or developing the properties, acquiring the land is particularly difficult, especially when you're looking at planning applications. Even though the government supports that and it has it within their planning applications and framework, even finding land sometimes is quite difficult, and obviously the cost can be prohibitive. And then there's the scalability. So advantage of build to rent is it allows for scalable investments. So investors can kind of start small, so start as a small investor and then grow and become much bigger, and then grow a portfolio of rental properties. But it also then gives a ability to go further in a different space in regards to not just down in the south, in the north, east and west, depending on where they want to set their targets and set their markets. So, you know, there's a lot of scalability that allows them to be able to do that, and flexibility within the market. But then that is also tied to the overall property market itself. And as we've seen already, the economic downturns really do impact demand and rental prices. So on one hand, yes, demand is high and rental prices are high, but that means then there's a lot of people within the sector then can't access it, or there's not enough properties, or the properties that are available at the moment are too expensive for anybody to really purchase, and then it's the affordability issue that comes into play. So build to rent, in one respect, it provides a lot of advantages, but if it's more expensive, then likelihood is tenants will go for the less expensive because economically they just can't afford that kind of lifestyle, certainly not yet. So there is a market dependency there. But another advantage is long-term appreciation. So build-to-rent properties can benefit from longer-term appreciation in value, and obviously that contributes to the overall return on investment. And let's be sensible about it. That's exactly what landlords and agents were all in there. Yes, to provide property, yes, to provide a great consumer experience, but also then to make profit and to build profit and to be able to scale that. So having specifically focused build to rent properties allows you to do that. Gives you the tools, gives you the mechanisms, the portfolios to be able to manage all of that. Oh, sorry, Kelsey, thank you. To be able to manage that. So there's a long-term appreciation because it is always a long-term. It's not a quick in, quick out. It's not like flipping a property on the normal residential street where you're looking to make a small amount of money, then reinvest and do it again and again. This is a long-term strategy, and that's exactly how it should be looked, which is why, in a way, your longer term or larger investors know this and plan for this and have the strategies, whereas your small investors might find that a little bit more difficult, especially because it's more expensive and you've got to have the ability to be able to fund all of this, and small investors don't always necessarily get access to that. And then one of the other challenges that we have is obviously the regional variances, and as we've already seen from the yields, if you're up in Edinburgh, you're like anything up to 9%, but down in Portsmouth, you're down to about 5%. So location is definitely critical when you're deciding where your build to rent portfolio or investment decisions are going to be. But you've also got the impact of local planning as well. So even though the government is kind of behind building and making sure there's enough affordable homes and rental properties for people to live in, it doesn't necessarily mean that those local councils, those local areas will just do and provide planning permission for build to rent, because it's never ever as simple as that. So that impacts on investment decisions. Obviously that impacts on rental yields, and then the varying demands across the regions will impact on whether those large investors will invest in the areas that probably need it, but at the moment maybe don't have the right level of yields that they want from an investment side of things, especially if they've got shareholders that they have to then manage expectations and are looking for, not only to just build the property, but obviously get a longer term amount of money back on that investment at that time. So I think what that particular page shows you is that there are advantages, there are challenges, but equally I think that they're not easily overcome, but they can be overcome, that are not insurmountable. So we can go on to the next slide, please. But as you can see here, there are hidden complexities in regards to build to rent. Now, there's complexities within the rental sector. You only have to look at the amount of legislation, the hoops, the hurdles that agents and landlords have to manage in order just to rent a property out and rent successfully, and hopefully with very little issues. And build to rent have all of those, but then they have additional ones. So I've just kind of fleshed out some hidden ones that maybe not everybody thinks about. And the first one's about collateral new home warranties. Now I've used cladding and EWS1 forms because cladding, especially after the recent issue at Grenfell, it's in everybody's mind, and it's still very relevant. And if you look everywhere today, and even just coming into London today, I could see how many properties that are multifamily are having the cladding removed, because of the fact is that obviously it's not safe, or if it's not safe or they're not sure, they're removing it anyway. So all of that costs. So if you don't have the proper warranties, you don't have the proper insurances in place, and the safeguards, then that is a potential legal minefield as an investor, especially from a portfolio point of view, but even on a small investor, because you have less money to play with and you have less ability then to manage that should that happen. And we already have seen, certainly in the government side, that there's been loads of arguments about who's actually responsible for removing that cladding, keeping the property safe, and then replacing that. It's only recently that that's actually been kind of like settled, although there's still some areas where it's not actually in agreement. So your warranties are going to be absolutely vital whenever you're building a portfolio, whether small or large. And I would say in a way smaller, because larger corporates, they have the teams, they have that knowledge available. Small investors, not always. And then you've got overage and negotiation. Now, this is quite a new one in regards to my knowledge. But what this does is protects the seller or the freeholder in regards to triggering additional payment under conditions like long leasehold interest or changes in the property use. Because if you think about it, if we've got loads of build-to-rent properties and then for whatever reason the portfolio owner or the investor wants to sell, then that property use needs to change. So you've got to be able to plan for that, to be able to understand exactly what it is you need to make sure that those conditions are in place should that actually happen. So that is, again, something from a legal point of view needs to be looked at, addressed, and certainly legal teams should always be brought in to be able to deal with that rather than investors deal with that on their own. And then you have CML compliance and insurance. So the alignment with the Council of Mortgage Lenders handbook for the PRS, for the build to rent market, asset and acquisition, that's all about avoiding conflict with high street banking and lending standards, so that the investment, the way the investment is managed, the portfolio, and obviously the monies involved in all that are all compliant, and there's right insurance in place. Again, unfortunately, I'll go back to Grenfell and what happened there. So we've got the cladding on one side, but also insurance, and the fact that making sure that should the unthinkable happen, everything is in place and it protects not only the tenants, but also the building and everything that would be used in regards to that being managed should anything go wrong. And then there's exit strategies in the build to rent sector. Often these don't get thought about. It's a case of, well, I'm going to invest, I'm going to build these portfolios, I'm going to manage all these tenancies, etc. But often you don't have an exit strategy. And for me, you need that literally as soon as you start looking to invest. And this allows, you know, to the seamless transaction, you know, especially going from, I don't know, short-term tenancies to sales, and making sure that the asset is set up appropriately, so that, you know, if you're looking at a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 15, 20-year plan, depending on your portfolio, you've got the strategies in place so that you're not then having to deal with the legal side of things that should have been in place when you first started, that then prohibit you from either selling those assets, selling that portfolio, exiting the market, or just dealing with your actual portfolio in itself. So these are some of the hidden complexities certainly I would suggest that you think about. So we can go to the next slide, please. So talking about thinking about the industry and looking at the portfolios themselves, I want to talk about influence of retirees in real estate. The older rental population has doubled, or expected to double by 2030, and it's expected to reach 1 million. And presently, there's around about 400,000 households aged 65 plus that are renting. And we know, just looking at the demographics, looking at the census that government carry out, is that, you know, our older population is living longer, which is absolutely fabulous. We've all got parents, we've got siblings, you know, and we want everybody to still be here, you know, at a later stage, enjoying life and, you know, hopefully having a great retirement. But that in itself then causes stresses and problems on the sector. And there's definitely a shift from historically high ownership, as we've seen, to more rates among the demographic of renting. And as you can see from the stats here, over 65s renting is going to rise from 5.7% to 11.5% within a decade. And I think that's actually quite conservative, bearing in mind the ageing population and also where we are in regards to the availability of homes and stock. And renting by this group is actually going to soar from a, you know, actual money point of view, from 5.1 billion to 12.7 billion by 2033. So what that says is that there's a huge amount of opportunity within this sector, because if more and more people are coming in, of that age group, it means there's going to be more demand, which if there's more demand, then there's going to be more likelihood that we can build more or bigger portfolios for the build to rent, and then house the older population, and they're going to be less likely to be moving. They want to set routes. They don't want to be going from property area to area, etc. So they are a really good long-term investment, certainly from the landlord, certainly from the agent point of view. And then just the last statistic there, you've got talk about mortgages. So at the moment, the 65 plus group pay about 1.8 billion annually in mortgages, but that's less than half of the rental spending. So if we're looking at, say, 3.6 to 4 billion annually in regards to rental spending, you can now see the attraction of the build to rent market and why it's built, and it's getting bigger all the time. But if you imagine, we're only at 1%, can you imagine what that would look like if we were in the same percentage mark of Germany for 40%, and what that would then actually do to those figures and how that would build out. If I can have the next slide, please. And part of that influence of retirees in real estate is that shift in lifestyle. So the retirees are increasingly opting for rental living. They want the convenience, they want the flexibility that build to rent offers them, and also desire for maintenance-free lifestyle. I've got an older mum, I've got friends who are already starting to retire. They don't want to be thinking about maintenance, they don't want to be thinking about their bill. They want to be able to enjoy where they're living and do the things that they maybe couldn't have done when they were working. So having a maintenance-free lifestyle, not having those troubles, those tribulations to deal with, is certainly a real pull for this particular sector. And then there's community engagement. So as I said earlier, the build to rent market communities fosters social connections. It appeals to retirees seeking an active and engaged lifestyle. And these shared spaces and amenities really enhance their quality of life, because a lot of retirees, some are on their own, maybe they no longer have their family, their partner, their husband, their wife with them. And so they're looking to share their lifestyle with people in a similar position and also age group. So build to rent communities, and especially those ones that really cater for them, are going to give them all of that and give them that security. And it also gives them the ability to downsize. So there's real financial benefits for retirees about unlocking the potential in their owned properties, and then allowing them to use that capital preservation to put into either the rental properties or give them more affordability and flexibility to do the things in life that they would like to do, rather than maybe, I don't know, having a 4-bedroom house that they're literally rattling around in when they're in a build to rent market property in a community that's got people of the same kind of age that they can then feel comfortable with, and then they feel a little bit less stressed and also a lot more supported in that particular environment. We can have the next slide, please. And as I said, this goes towards service-orientated living. So it addresses the preferences for hassle-free living. So they don't have to manage things like maintenance. When you own your own home, you're responsible for everything. When you're in a build-to-rent property or portfolio and sector, all that's taken care of for you. The security, community events, that all evolve around the needs and preferences of those renters in that community. And you can see the draw there. You can see it takes away a lot of that stress, a lot of that thinking, and gives you more time to get on with enjoying, as I said, your retirement. And also the location preferences. Often these will align with retirees. So again, going back to the rental side of the yields, that's why a lot of investors are looking at, well, where do we go? Where is the bigger requirement or need in those areas? So that could be Bournemouth, because that's a high level of 65+ renters, or it could also be further up north in Edinburgh. So it gives them that flexibility to align with retirees' location preferences, proximity to amenities. Obviously, healthcare is extremely important, social activities, and making them a really attractive housing option because they are built for purpose. They're built for those renters, for those needs, rather than generic and that trying to do a one size fits all. They're really kind of looking at this particular sector because they don't necessarily need to have all the healthcare provisions as such, because a lot of retirees, you know, they are living longer, their healthcare needs are actually better catered for, and it means then they don't necessarily need the type of homes and care homes, etc., that are often associated with retirement and retirees. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. And I thought this set of stats would be very useful. One of the biggest problems we've got is, as I said, lack of flexibility within the industry. So you can see here, there's nearly 2 million what they call locked bedrooms due to downsizing hesitancy. So you've got people, and said, in 4-bedroom houses, there might only be 1 or 2 there. So there's bedrooms there that, you know, other families could potentially have or buy, but they don't have that ability because there's a hesitancy from going from, obviously, from the familiar down to the unfamiliar. And if those particular properties that they're going to don't cater for them, as I said, they're too generic, they don't have that community spirit, then quite rightly people will be less likely to sell that house and move into something smaller. And you see this, spare bedrooms have surged from 24.2 million to 26 million in a decade, and that is set to increase. So you've got all those rooms, all that physical space unused. And obviously that increases the housing stock inefficiency, because at the end of the day, if you've got stock there that is not doing what it should or is not helping, it's going to be a detriment to what the actual industry and the tenants and the people within the sector really need. And you see the 2.6 million older individuals are facing unmet support needs as well. So we do have care homes, and they're being built actually quite at a fast rate, but we also have homes that deal with things for disability, for dementia, and for other ailments and other support needs. But there's still unmet support needs in regards to just the general renting, so you don't necessarily need a facility. You maybe just need, so you've got someone on call in that particular community that is geared up for you, just there to be asked or looked for help if needed. And as you can see here, social care sector is grappling with 165,000 job shortfall. So what this means is that all of those people that need these kind of social care and are looking to either downsize, they haven't got a lot of choice. So the build to rent market is closely looking at, well, how can we plug this gap? And certainly from an NHS point of view, the lists are growing due to delayed charges because there's nowhere for these people to go because they need certain support. And it's the same as everything. I always look at the industry as a bit of a ladder. If everybody's on the ladder and no one can move up or down because everything above and below you is literally impacted and no one can move, then we're just stuck. We need the ability to go up, i.e. upsize and downsize, to be able to then make space for everybody else. But we can't do that if we've got all of these issues that are impacting the sector. And certainly if we can't downsize and open that freedom up for families to move up and create that void space so that we can start moving through the ladder, then it becomes even more difficult. And we already know that we've got a shortfall in the industry in regards to homes being built. So this is where build to rent really has a potential to make an impact. So if we can have the next slide, please. But with anything, you've got to safeguard what it is that you're doing. Certainly from an agent point of view, if you've got build to rent portfolios on your books that you're managing on behalf of the investors, you've got to have a look at to see what it is that you need from an infrastructure point of view. So I've identified a few here, and obviously this is not exhaustive. I'm sure that if you're looking at this particular graphic, you can think of plenty more, but I think we'd be here certainly more than an hour. So for me, I think some of the key issues that we need to be looking at and safeguarding is things around harnessing data, and that's to understand your consumer habits, identify trends, and make smarter business decisions. If you know what your tenants want, you know where they want it in regards to location, and you know the kind of amenities that they need, then you can build to that. You can build to that spec, which means then you've got an audience you already know are there, willing and waiting to enter your particular portfolio, your building, your flats, your apartments, and so that you know that then that from an investor point of view that you are going to be stable. But the other thing also that often gets missed is about recruitment and training of teams to manage the complexities of build to rent, to understand it. So, I mean, today I'm talking to you for an hour, but there's so much more that we could look at, and the research I've done to do this is huge. And I don't think, you know, even a couple of hours would even really touch the top level of everything that we could go through. So it's clear that you need people who know what they're doing, you need the training and the recruitment and the real detailed and specific management of the build to rent to make sure that they're compliant, they're safe, and they're making sure that from a legislation point of view, you're de-risking your business as an agent when you're actually managing the portfolio on behalf of your client. Obviously, changing tax laws and increased regulation is all about getting the right advice. Property managers now is a very specialised role. You've really got to understand what it is from a legislation point of view, what's actually going to be impacting the market. And we already know, especially with rental reform bill, with the Building Safety Act coming in last year in October 2022, there's loads of complexities, loads of things we've got to think about. So you need the right people, the right advice, the right professionalism, which then ties it back to right recruitment and training of teams in order to be able to manage these complexities. And then investment in the golden thread, so ensuring safety management through digitisation. So golden thread gets used a lot, and I use it a lot, and you'll see it in a slide that we're going to get to shortly. But that basically means it's the journey of the property, the information, and how it's handled, so that it's very clear and it's accessible and people understand it, and all the different interested stakeholders have access to that, can see that, and then make sure that the management of the property is efficient, it's safe, and as the government's already mandated with Building Safety Act, this needs to be digitised. And this all helps with making sure that the tenancies are well managed, and that there's robust policies there, especially around antisocial behaviour orders and de-risking the rental default. So this is the people that are not paying their rent on time, because again, with Section 21 being revoked and the housing court's not quite there and not really understanding how Section 8 is going to be used, you know, there's a potential where you could get a group of renters that can't move on, are effectively blocking that space, but also then causing problems within the community, and that becomes very difficult to manage. So you need those robust policies to make sure that should something happen, you know what you can't do legally, you've got the right training, you've got the right teams to be able to manage that, you're not flouting any laws, and you've got the right advice to make sure that's managed correctly, properly, safely, and also for the benefit of the tenant, regardless of the situation. Because as it says here, that, you know, more people opting to rent as property affordability becomes further impacted by interest rates. So there's less people buying homes, more people coming into the rental sector. So they need more, they want more from the sector, and also from how the actual rental property is actually managed. So we go to the next slide, please. So what we've got to look at certainly from that point of view is look at the pitfalls and effective risk management mitigation strategies. So I've put some in here, and I'm going to touch on them very lightly because there's 2 pages of them, and we could be again here could definitely talk to you for another hour. So compliance, obviously failing to keep abreast of evolving regulations and standards, and then obviously that comes up with legal issues, and then from an agent point of view, you've got the reputational damage that might cause you and your client. So be able to mitigate that, regular audits, you know, make sure you're adhering to all your requirements, all your legal frameworks, and but making sure that you're keeping on top of that all the time. So regular audits are the way you mitigate that. Obviously, you've got market volatility. Some of it is out of your control in regards to economic uncertainties and fluctuations, but then by diversifying your actual investments across different locations and property types, that helps you mitigate the impact of market volatility, and as I said, it creates diversification within your portfolio. Tenant issues, you're always going to get tenant issues, even whether you've got the best community, best facilities, there's always going to be some dissent. It's just nature, unfortunately. So you're going to have to deal with difficult tenants at some point. So looking at property damage, non-payment of rent, all these composed challenges. So look at tenant screening, you know, make sure you've got a really robust screening process to select reliable tenants and minimise those issues. So, you know, don't do a very light touch, do the full screening process so that you know that everything has been mitigated down, and then if there are issues, hopefully there'll be small ones. Maintenance repairs are something that's going to definitely happen, because obviously you're dealing with a big portfolio, a big structure, and you've got to make sure that, you know, the property is both safe and also fit for purpose. So regular inspections, looking at proactive maintenance really can prevent costly repairs and ensure tenant satisfaction, and also not disrupt your operations and don't put strain on your budgets either. Cybersecurity, we're online, we're digitising everything, so there's going to be risks with that. So you've got to look at your vulnerability from a cyber threat point of view and what risks they pose, and then mitigate them down. So investing in robust cybersecurity, getting again the right people, the right teams, the right measures, and making sure that sensitive data is protected and that any cyber threats are also managed. And remember, you know, all this is about effective risk management. It's all about ongoing processes that require adaptability and proactive approach. So again, they're not insurmountable. It's just about having them in place and making sure they're effective, and make sure the right teams manage them consistently. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So increased interest rates. Now, obviously, we've seen an increased rate. We stabilised at the moment, but there is some talk that might grow again, but we're certainly going to be looking to be here still in 2024 at the rates we're at now. So obviously, that escalates borrowing costs, it impacts on profitability, and also the financial feasibility in regards to stress testing as to whether banks will actually lend. So, you know, being financially flexible really is going to be helpful. So exploring fixed mortgage rates, fixed financing, and also looking to impact the risk of rising interest rates by forward planning. And again, having the right people, the right advice to help you that. With increased interest rates, as I've already said, it will certainly reduce funding options and hinder acquisition. And obviously, if you're not acquiring or developing the projects, then you're not going to have that money and that regular stream coming through. So it's about being diverse with your sources, like seeking other funding sources like partnerships, private investors, and reducing reliance on a single channel, not a single bank, not a single investor, because it's that old adage about having all your eggs in one basket. If you do that and you drop the basket, you're going to break all your eggs. So it's about being more diverse. And as I've already mentioned, you've got the stress testing, the economic downturns of unforeseen events that expose vulnerabilities in your financial models. And we're already seeing that in regards to the markets and what's happening around the globe. Everything's having an impact on our availability, money-wise, what we can and can't do, even things like costs of builds and how much that's all gone up. That all affects your project viability, and if that's too costly and you can't pass that on and people can't afford the higher rates for living in those properties, then you're not going to get either the investment or the actual people moving in and paying the rent. So obviously this all increases your pressure. So you've got to look at how you can manage that and mitigate that down, and just make sure that you keep on top of it. And I mentioned a few slides earlier about you know, planning applications. So you know, navigating planning at the best of times is difficult, and when you're looking at a build to rent portfolio, it's even worse. But it doesn't mean it's insurmountable, but you've got to look at things that, you know, where you might face resistance, like community or delaying project time. So certainly from a community point of view, you know, engaging early, making sure you're really proactive in what it is you're going to do, and make sure that if you're going to do a build to rent portfolio, you're looking at your community, your market, and making sure it's going to actually fit in for where you are. And also being transparent, you know, addressing concerns, talking to people. You know, it's not difficult. You know, find out what it is they're feeling, why they're concerned, and how you deal with that. And then navigating these challenges all require a strategic and adaptable approach. So if you've got no build to rent strategy, you're going to have problems. So it's all about making sure you're looking at your risk assessments, your contingency plans, and having an overall strategy that you can go back to. And it should always be a fluid document. It should always be looking at to see, well, where am I going? What am I doing with this? And how do I manage that going forward? And do I have the right processes, the right people, and also the right framework to be able to manage that? And part of that framework is looking at, you know, how everything comes together. So this is where we're looking at turbocharging your build to rent property management. So quite clearly something I'm very invested in and very interested in as part of what we're doing with inventory base. So as you can see here, we're looking at predictive maintenance, you know, using the right tools, identify and address potential issues before they become problems, not wait until they do, reducing downtime, improving property longevity. And this is all about looking at what your infrastructure is, looking at your assets and keeping on top of the maintenance side, making sure you've got your right certificates, your compliance, and then making sure from a legislation point of view, everything is in order. And then, you know, remote management means about having the right digital solutions. So you can remotely monitor. I mean, with inventory base, you could have smart sensors where those sensors will tell you, you know, whether a property is too hot, too cold, too humid, whether there's mold issues, whether the alarms are working, the occupancy, carbon dioxide usage, and whether when that's in a property, maybe it's void, or it might be in when it's a retiree property, where you could then determine whether someone's active or not in the property. Should there then be some kind of intervention? All this provides agile and responsive management, and that's what the renter wants, and that's what the investor wants as well. They want something that will breathe and mould with the renters, give them a great experience, which in turn will allow them to invest and be able to invest in more portfolios. And also you've got to automate the financial side of things. So rent collection, invoicing, administration, all these are burdens. So you've got to try and reduce that risk, minimise the errors, and make sure that that's all streamlined and running freely. And certainly in the build to rent sector, they're already looking at that. And certainly from an inventory based point of view, we already do that with how our workflow is in regards to things like asset management, our reporting, periodic inspections, and our reporting tools. And if I can have the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, next slide after that. Thank you. So this all becomes part and parcel of the golden thread. So the golden thread is, like I said, that journey through the property where everything is interconnected, the stakeholders, the digitalisation of all the information. So everything is very clear, and it is able to be interrogated, and also in data and information inputted into that, so that it builds that picture, that journey of that property, that portfolio, that consumer experience. And as you can see here, you know, part of that is PropTech integration, you know, embracing cutting edge property technology, and hence why we have PropTech, and how it streamlines your operations, you know, from tenant communication to maintenance requests, and really enhancing that overall efficiency. And this is where smart building solutions come into play. And we talked already about smart sensors. You know, implementing smart building technologies such as the Internet of Things devices, automated systems, you know, improving energy consumption, energy management, and the efficiency side. Security is very important, you know, not just for retiree and the elderly side of the sector, but certainly the younger generation. They're very much about energy efficiency, but also security for them, for their family, and you know, all the overall the overall resident experience in regards to looking after, you know, how that portfolio is managed, and the fact that the enjoyment of being where they have chosen to live. And you have data analytics, so utilising and advancing data analytics to get better decisions, predict your maintenance needs, so you know when your EICR is due, your gas safety is due, although obviously it's going to be less of a reliance on gas as we go forward, despite the government changing some of their plans on gas boilers. But we are seeing a much more move towards electricity and less away from, and more moving away from gas. And as I said, enhancing the overall property performance, you know, how from an EPC point of view does it perform, and also then its environmental impact. And then we've got digital platforms, so leveraging all the platforms like Inventory Base to onboard the tenant, to deal with the lease management, the communication, and simplifying the administrative processes so that the tenant, again, experience is enhanced, is supported, and it means less of a chore. And because it is automated, certainly from a property management point of view, from an agent management point of view, it's easier to manage, easier to identify issues, and as we move forward, make sure that that the build to rent sector is flourishing. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is where we are coming to the end now. So is build to rent generally the way forward? So if I can have the next slide, please. I would say yes, because it's addressing the housing gap. So faced with a shortfall of over 2.3 million homes, agents really can leverage a scalable solution provided by the BTR sector, and to meet what we know and we've seen, and is going to continue to be a surge of demand in the rental market. It's not going to abate anytime soon. It's going to get bigger, and we're going to probably see that 6.5 million number in the rental sector come around very, very quickly. And bearing in mind we're still having to deal with stock and every other issue, then this is something that, you know, that we need to be addressing like now. And I think the build to rent sector is definitely the way forward. Obviously, you've got innovation amid challenges, agents navigating challenges. The BTR not only presents hurdles, but also showcases determination in innovation, offering opportunity for agents and the ability to explore creative solutions for successful project management. So there are challenges, but there's also innovation to do that. So we've got a can-do attitude. And I think certainly over the last few years since COVID, we've proven that. And then quality homes and lifestyles. Agents engaged in BTR can emphasise commitment to providing quality homes, which is a real big issue at the moment, especially with, for want of a better phrase, the landlord bashing, the agent bashing that we're seeing, where there's constant homes are not fit for purpose, agents are not fit for purpose. We can change that narrative, improve lifestyles, and also create those community spaces and amenities that really align with the expectations of renters. So we go to the next slide, please. So build to rent, you know, future-proofing investments, it's a stable and long-term investment prospect, and it definitely does meet increasing demand for rental properties. It does provide long-term investment prospects, and it also aligns with that increasing demand for rental properties whilst delivering that reliable income stream. And so from the agent point of view, that's what you want. You want an investor, you want a portfolio to manage that is going to continue, and that is going to provide that income stream for not only the investor, the great experience for the renter, but also for you as the agent. And then they said adapting to demographics, you know, recognising that we have evolving demographic needs and that we need to evolve with that. And if we do as agents, as sector members, suppliers, contractors, and the whole infrastructure, you know, we can offer that flexibility. We can have a more diverse housing option and also attract a broader tenant base. And then, as I said, certainly from the private rental sector point of view, we can increase that experience. So if you just go to the second to last slide, we're pretty much on time. Rather than end with a synopsis, I'm kind of asking you a question. Do you think that build to rent is the solution to the housing crisis? You can answer now, you can ask questions now, or you can just have a think about it. But you know, if you're curious, go and look. There is loads of information available, and there are agents already in the build to rent market, and I think there's already agents already looking at it. So, you know, think about the question. Do you think that it is the solution to the housing crisis? And if you think yes, then now's the time to get involved. So that is the end of my power hour. I hope that is interesting to you. I hope it was informative. Thank you for your time. You can see contact details for both Infantry Base in regards to managing the portfolio, managing the build to rent, the process in regards to inspection, looking after the property, the maintenance side, and also the facilities management. And if you do need more information or you would like a copy of the presentation, then do feel free to contact me. But I know also Property Mark will be giving you a copy of that as well. So thank you, Kelsey. That is me done. If there is any questions, be happy to take them, and we are very much on time.
Thank you, Sian. We don't have any questions in the chat box, but feel free to email courses.events@propertymark.co.uk, or you can email Sian and we'll answer any questions and I'll forward them over to her. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending the Power Hour, and I hope everyone has an amazing rest of the week. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.